He says, did I tell you that I have a son? I said, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
We've only had 5 meetings.
They're coming in like vultures. They never talked to me before now, but now that I'm in my 90s, I have a whole new family. Really, you need to spend the money.
He was 98 years old, cutest guy in the world. He dressed like Howdy Doody, wonderful guy, a lot of money. Came with his second wife who was 80 years old at that point.
It should be someone younger or the same age, right?
That's a great point because you don't want somebody passing before you do.
But they fell in love as soon as he died, right?
That's exactly right.
This podcast is not about death. Hey friends, welcome back to the Marty Davis Show, where we turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones and really get to the heart of what really matters. You know, today we're here at the beautiful Andaz Hotel. Look out through the back windows here. You'll see the beach, their gorgeous pool, South Beach's newest hotel. My guest today is a good friend. He's not only a lawyer, but he's a visionary in the ideas of legacy, service, and what's really important in life, and living a true life. Peter Ariz is a correcting that. He's almost as old as I am. So that means he's, 37 years practicing estate planning. A great lawyer, a good friend. But what sets him apart is he practices with his heart. It's heart-centered. He cares about his clients, and he cares about their feelings and their concerns. It's all about this heart-centered approach, which is really rare in the legal world. So Peter's passion in helping his clients plan for the future is surprisingly practical and spiritually impractical, I would say, but so refreshing, and a great willingness to be intentional in your life. Peter, I am so excited about having you here. And I want to tell our audience that this podcast is not about death. It's all about planning for your future, empowerment, and living the true life so that since you know that you've done the planning, if you talk with Peter or an estate lawyer like Peter, but don't go to anybody else but Peter, that you're living your life with intention and you can enjoy today because you know your family is protected. Peter, welcome to the show. Let's get to it.
Marty, thank you for your kind words. Amazing. I'm honored to be here. An incredibly beautiful hotel, by the way.
Isn't this great?
I'm blown away.
No.
Because I was here before. They did this hotel, and you had invited us all here before, and it's a changed place. It's so incredible. So the ambiance is great. The people are great, and you're great. I have to tell you, I'm honored by your words, and I'm more honored by our friendship.
Well, I'm very happy we're friends as well. And, you know, they just completed the hotel in May, which makes it the newest hotel on South Beach. And we all know going to the newest place is the most fun. And whether it's, a coffee break to cocktails at night, it's the place to be.
You're absolutely right.
Peter, you've been practicing estate planning for 37 years. How did you get started? What was the plan? And what's your plan going forward?
It's interesting because I started out as a real estate developer attorney at Holland & Knight. Because of real estate, it became a real problem with a lot of cases to see people in court, probate court, inheritances. And I really gained a love for that, and I left the other stuff behind and concentrated on estate planning because of the same reasons that you just mentioned. The idea that when people don't plan their future, things happen when you go to court, things that are not something that you expected. So for example, I have so many stories, Marty. It's
great.
Over 30 some years of doing this. But there's a couple of really terrible stories. One story where a young lady brings, her father had just passed away. He was trying to put together a will through one of those online services, which is always my favorite. He could never finish it. And he passed away without anything in writing. He had been married previously and had 2 children that he had not spoken with. He had tried to contact them for 35 years, and they never wanted to speak with him. And of course, he had 2 children from his next marriage, one of them was this young lady, and they brought him in, and they brought in the case. We had to go to probate court, and guess who shows up in probate court asking for half the proceeds from that probate? The children that had not seen him in 35 years.
But they fell in love as soon as he died, right?
That's exactly right. And this is what happens when you don't plan your future. So I gained, as you had mentioned, a love for really helping people. And actually, it was something that was pivotal in the way that I practice law. I stopped looking at clients as clients, and I literally said to myself, how do I become of service? I always say that my two prayers in the morning is I'm thankful for what I have. And my second prayer is, how may I serve? And that literally changed my practice because it opened the doors to so many people that needed that service. But it had to be a change within me to actually do that. I had to bring about a change in me to open up to what was out there. And then what was out there just came to me very easily. You don't even have to work for it. It comes to you because when you're of service to people, people will come to you, they'll bring their friends, they'll bring their family, they'll bring anybody that they know. And that's true for me and my practice.
I am sure. And for those watching the podcast, Peter's firms were, the top-notch firms in the city. And to leave those and to go out on your own and take on your own philosophy is so very important. And we're all so glad you did.
Thank you.
I'm a client. And Peter and I belong to a business group called BNI. BNI stands for Business Network International. And Peter's now president of our South Beach chapter here in Miami-Dade County. And on a regular basis, you tell us all, if you don't plan, someone else will plan for you. Tell us a little bit about what happens when you don't plan. You've given us the example of the long-lost children who now love their parents after they've passed. But what about some of the other problems when you don't plan?
Well, a parent with small children, if they don't plan and they don't sit down and write, at least they will, Marty, that would say, these are the people that I want as guardians. And remember, they may stay with grandma, but grandma may not know how to balance a checkbook. So you need to make sure that your children who are minors stay with someone that they love and trust. And that may not be the same person that handles the children's money. You may need to get somebody else that you trust that knows how to handle money for the children. That's a concern that you have. How about one of the issues that have been coming on a lot over the last few years has been, children with disabilities. And when they turn 18, autism has become a huge issue. And so I have a number of parents that come to me every year. And when I say a number, we've got quite a few cases. I usually get a couple a month of parents that come in and say, my child is now 20 and I'm having questions asked, why can't he sign papers or why can't she do this? Because they cannot do so. So you need to get a guardianship for them. So that leads to another issue. You don't plan, and then how are these children, how are these young adults who are impaired or disabled in ways, how are they protected? I also do special needs trust for people with special needs. They cannot get government help. They cannot participate in programs many times. They're disqualified from doing so when you are getting an inheritance. So there's ways to be able to work with that to allow those people to be able to get help and to participate and do what they can. So the planning is so critical. So for example, you have a child that has some challenges and now you're 80 years old and that child is 60 years old and still not knowing how to manage money. Do you want to turn over that whole amount of money to that child, or do you want to be able to maybe do it in different stages of their lives?
Sure.
Do you address it that way?
Well, and two, if you don't set up that planning, I suppose government programs take over and they may not do the same type of care that you as the parent or the guardian of someone really wanted to have happen, right?
Well, what happens, Marty, is that you have so many people going after that inheritance.
Sure.
And so you see today Medicaid going after inheritances and able to do so in the state of Florida. Literally 9 out of 10 cases that we take to probate court end up being challenged if they were over 65 years old and they got some Medicaid. 9 out of those 10 cases are going to be claims that Medicaid has on the estate. So now we've got to sit here and fight the state of Florida for, for their claims on Medicare on the estate of a person. Maybe a little house that a person has that maybe has an equity of $150,000, but they want that. Sure. Or a chunk of that.
So they can't keep that if it isn't set up correctly.
Exactly.
So then we're talking about the people that need to come to see you are anyone who has some assets, anyone who has children, anyone who has special needs children especially, and if there are special needs people in your life. All of those things need the expertise of an estate planning lawyer like you.
If you have parents and they don't have a plan, I promise you, you're going to have to deal with those issues when it comes time for them to be either taken care of, or they pass.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to handle that?
Yeah, we brought my dad in to see you and to do just that, so that his assets were protected. And let's talk about, I look at Instagram all the time, and we get all of this advice from people on Instagram, most of them completely unqualified, and they're talking about something that they read about or they heard. If I have a will, but don't have a trust, and I pass away, does that still have to be probated?
Great question, Marty. Whether you have a will or you don't have a will, it's going to go to probate court. The only way you can avoid probate court is to do a trust. I like to there's two types of trust, a revocable and irrevocable trust. The irrevocable trust is the one that's used most often, which is one that once you do it, you can change it and adjust to your needs as you progress in life. And so as part of our estate plan, we do the trust, which is the way to keep you out of court. But I can't begin to tell you how many people come to me with trust in their hands. Sometimes they're poorly prepared, and sometimes they're okay, but nothing has been placed in those trusts. So they haven't funded the trust. So it's as if you had done nothing.
Right.
Because your assets are still in your name, which means that when you pass, your heirs are gonna have to go to court to claim those properties.
Yeah, the bank accounts, the real estate, all of those things, the brokerage accounts never get put into the trust, right?
At all.
And it's crazy because I hear that over and over again. And they have a beautiful trust which does absolutely nothing because in case they put something in it, it doesn't matter, right?
The funny part of it is that people say, well, I'm a beneficiary of the bank account. Well, go to the bank after the person dies, and the first thing the bank's going to tell you is we need a court order telling us that you're the beneficiary, even though you were put in as beneficiary. Because banks are very careful. They have been sued so many times by people that were not given their benefit. And so they're very wary of those issues. So they ask for a court order. So going back to your initial point, which is an excellent point, is having a will is not enough to keep you out of court. I always tell people, hey, don't plan your future if you don't want to. Lawyers are going to make a lot more money in probate court than they are by planning your future. It's little money compared to what you're going to pay in probate court. Because, and it's very clear, once you plan your future, you have control, multi-generational control over your heirs. You specifically decide this is how this money is going to be distributed. This is when I want to distribute it. This is who I wanted to get it. And you're not going to have issues with that.
Well, it makes perfect sense. And you're controlling what happens.
Absolutely.
I think it's a huge misconception when people talk about estate planning lawyers. What do you want to have happen when you pass away? People don't want to talk about it because it's talking about death. But quite frankly, it's not talking about death at all, is it? It's talking about what you want to do with your assets while you're here and making certain that their loved ones are protected when you're gone, right?
Absolutely. That's another great point by you, Marty, because the idea is most people that come to me take a while to come to me because they fear that by sitting down and doing an estate plan, death is going to come. It doesn't work that way. And we all know, one of my favorite book titles was No One Gets Out Alive. I think it was the biography of the Doors.
Okay.
And it's true.
And it's so appropriate, too. Yes. No.
No one gets out alive. So let's just understand that. The question is, if you want, and you said this earlier, if you want to live in peace, if you want to be able to know that you can get on a plane and travel the world and not worry about what happens to your money when you're not here, then the way to go is to plan. Just the same way as if you have children and you worry about their future. If you don't plan their future, if you don't buy some kind of school payment plan for college, you're going to worry. That's the first thing the parents usually do. They buy a Florida prepaid, or they buy, investment programs that will allow them to pay for their kids' schooling when the time comes. Well, if you're able to do that and you're willing to do that, why can't you plan for your future, for that of your children, for that of your spouse, for that of your grandchildren even?
Sure.
Because I have a lot of people that will tell me, I would like to be able to give a gift to my grandchildren. I've got 8 of them, and I want to give them X amount of money each. And we can put that down.
Right. No, I think it's so interesting that people have that misconception about, well, if I start talking about this, something's going to happen. But quite frankly, I think it should be the other way around, that once you do a trust and once you do a will and all of those documents that you prepare, quite frankly, you have that huge weight off your mind, and you can live life with intention and enjoy it, knowing that the family's protected.
That is so true, Marty. It's the idea that once you've made your commitment to discipline in your life in some way, it's like meditation. People have a hard time meditating because they can't sit down for 5 minutes, But I always say discipline in meditation is spiritual freedom in so many ways, because you get so many benefits from it. It's the same thing with planning. If you're able to sit down with a good planning attorney and make sure that you do your research and they're known, and sit down and ask questions. Do not be afraid. They shouldn't be selling you anything. They should be talking to you openly and honestly. I get people calling me on the phone, and sometimes I spend an hour on the phone with them because they have very difficult and challenging problems. And I put forth thoughts and ideas to maybe tackle those problems. So make sure that you call a few attorneys, talk to people, see what answers they give you. And that's how you know when you're talking to someone with experience. And that's going to give you maybe the push for you to make the commitment to put something in writing that's going to give you, like you said, peace of mind.
And for me, when you did my documents, the clarity that you get as well, because you really sat down and thought about what's important to you, where you want things to go, who may need some extra help and who doesn't. And, I had a client years ago, and I was working with an estate planning lawyer who was before I met you. She was a wonderful woman. Roz was a very interesting woman. She married twice in her life. She was a special ed teacher in her younger years, and she married a fellow who, her first husband invented the push-button radio for cars. This was World War II time, and he passed away. She inherited his money. They lived in a hotel in New York during the war, kind of a tough time. Then she married another fellow who was also an engineer, and he invented the retractable antenna in cars. Most of our viewers probably don't even know that cars used to have an antenna to get radio signals that went up and down. And the reason for that was so no one would break off the antenna or bend it, because remember, that was a fun thing to do as a kid. I never did it, of course, but I saw it happen. And anyway, she had no children, and she lived till her late 90s, and she was very philanthropic, and she wanted to give to American Heart Association, the Red Cross. She was giving to everyone, but she had these cousins, and these cousins were just circling. The older she got, the closer they got, and they'd visit her then, and she'd tell me, Marty, they're coming in like vultures. They never talked to me before now, but now that I'm in my 90s, I have a whole new family. I don't want them in my will. And the estate planning lawyer that we were talking to really made it clear in the documents that, those were her relatives, those were her heirs, but her decision was to give her money to other sources and other opportunities. And she set up a foundation for children. She did a lot of wonderful things, but she intentionally put in the names of her heirs so that no one could argue that she had forgotten about them in her older age. It's something else about planning, right?
Yeah, and Marty, that's another, well, you're full of ideas. You know, you always are because of
I'm
your
full of it.
experience.
Yes, I know.
Not full of it, but of ideas. Get out of here. But this is another point that I tell people. Say you have 3 children and one of them passed. It happens with older people. I had a guy who came to see me. He was 98 years old, cutest guy in the world. He dressed like Howdy Doody, wonderful guy, a lot of money. Came with his second wife who was 80 years old at that point. All he talked about for 5 meetings, he had 5 meetings with me. All he talked about was his 2 daughters. And I prepare the documentation after 5 meetings. It usually doesn't take me more than a meeting or 2, but 5. And I sit down and I prepare his documentation. And when we're ready to come in to sign it, he says, "Did I tell you that I have a son?" I said, "No, you didn't. We've only had 5 meetings."
Yeah, why would you tell me in 5 meetings?
But the reason why I didn't tell you is I don't want him to get anything. I said, "Great, but that means that we can't sign this today because we have to specifically mention the fact that you are not going to give him anything, because if you don't mention that fact, he or his heirs can come back and try to claim a part of this estate." And that is very important, because if a child has passed, that child's children have a right to the estate, you know, of the deceased, if it's a grandparent or whatever. So the fact that the father or mother passed years ago does not exclude them from having their share of the estate.
Sure.
That's a legally protected right. But most people think, well, that person passed, so it's just us two, the 2 sisters or the 2 brothers or whatever. No, it's not just the 2 of you. It's that deceased person and their heirs. Okay, but if you don't specifically, as when you're doing a plan, if you don't specifically keep them out in writing, then they have a right to come back. Why would you want that problem?
Right.
Again.
Well, and it's once again, viewers, pay attention to 37 years of experience here. You don't get that with ChatGPT or Rocket Law or Legalese or whatever the online challenge is that will pop up a will for you and do a trust, because that experience is the experience of asking those right questions, right?
Marty, you always talk about the 12 documents that you do, and I love your talks when you do that, because your 40 plus years of experience doing it has put you in front of so many corporate matters and so many corporations. And so I don't know anybody who has as much experience corporate-wise than you do when you prepare a document. Now, don't tell me you can go to the internet and say, I can pull a Marty Davis document out of the internet. I don't think so, because it has so much experience in that. And that's what happens to me with these documents, because all the stories that I have experienced, all the challenging matters that have come from lack of planning or family squabbles that come to the table. I got a funny one. I have a document in my estate plan, which I prepared. It's called a disposition of personal property. That came from a battle between 2 sisters who were lovingly sisters for 60 some years each. And the mother passed away and left behind a $10,000 brooch. But she didn't say who was the 2 sisters who were going to get it.
Yeah.
So these 2 ladies spent over $150,000 in legal fees to determine who was going to get this $10,000 brooch. Now, tell me that's not the most ridiculous thing in the world. And I now, in all my documents, okay, they came to me after they got into a fight. I mean, there was no preparation. The mother had no documentation or anything, so they had no plan. But this was one of the things. And I always, in all my plans, have this document, which means that, and I always tell people, you don't have to write anything today, but it's going to be signed and notarized. But one day, you're going to sit down and you're going to make a list, and you're going to say, this is going to go to Johnny. This is going to go to Mary. This is going to go. And you've got a list of things that you want to give away, personal items. It may be a ring. It may be a watch. It may be a suit, whatever is of value, a family heirloom, and you will specifically assign it to that person. So when you die, there will not be anyone in court fighting over something that you left behind and you didn't say who it was going to, because you were going to say everything that's important.
That's so funny. I think of my own experience with my own family. My dad was one of 7 brothers and sisters, and his 2 sisters lived the longest, to the point where as they got older, they really needed assistance. And so they decided to move in together and live in the same house, which the brothers at the time all said, bad idea, bad idea. They never got along as sisters beforehand, and living together was a nightmare. And they fought over everything. And just as you've said here, when the one sister died, well, you know, all of the stuff that really belonged to that sister should go to me, the other sister, because I had to put up with her for all these years living together, and you know how miserable she was. So it's just those kinds of stories that, you know, people plan and be able to you know, make those decisions. So because, you know, there's nothing harder, is there, when someone passes, for the family members, even if there's no disagreements, to try and decide what to do. I know I continually ask my father, well, you know, when you pass away, do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want a service? Do you want, what is it that you want, Dad? And his response always was, I don't want to talk about it. And so it came to the point where he did pass away, and of course, we'd never talked about it. So my brother and sister and I had to make those decisions, not really knowing what he wanted, but, you know, and thank goodness we all agreed on what to do. But, you know, if there are differences of opinions among siblings or the heirs, it's a real problem. So once again, this planning is setting things in motion to make it easier for your heirs too, right?
No doubt. Look, it happens that I had a couple before same-sex marriage. It was a very sad story. They built a gallery together for 20 years. And then one of the 2 guys dies. Then the survivor comes to me. He had no will. He also didn't have a lot of ownership paperwork, even though he'd been involved in the thing. His family, the deceased family from England, who had not talked to him in 30 years, of course, came to claim the art gallery, which was worth millions of dollars. And I had to get into a fight with them to get at least a quarter of that money over to my client who had built that. But it should have all gone to him. We don't have those problems anymore with the legalization of same-sex marriage. But this was back then, and you had people just not getting their due, and people who didn't deserve it getting stuff that they didn't need to get, or they shouldn't have gotten. And so it's all about planning. It's all about looking forward and saying, you know, and by the way, if things change in the future, it's a revocable trust, so you can change it. Sometimes you're put in situations in which, you know, you have a certain plan and then you change. You know, I'm in the middle of a matter now where a gentleman called me 8 months ago, and he has a lot of real estate, very valuable real estate, and he talked to me for an hour about doing a plan. And afterwards he says, you know, I don't know if I'm going to need it. I said, okay, if you're a wise businessman, if you don't think you need a plan, it's okay, but I'm here to help you. Well, I got a call 2 weeks ago from a friend of mine who had referred him to me, and he says he was just diagnosed with brain cancer and is very challenged right now. And now everybody wants a plan. And now you've got issues of whether he can execute the plan, whether anything
if he's waited too long.
And you've got a number of players in the game right now that we didn't discuss. And so that's going to end up in court, I promise you, because I don't know if a plan can be put together in time. And so if it could be, it may save the situation, but that's what happens. He thought about it, and you don't know, because you don't know what surprises life has for you. So like you said, plan so you don't have to go through it.
Right. No, absolutely. It's the peace of mind. You know, Peter, many of our viewers are part of the LGBTQ community. And what are some of the special things? You've mentioned we do have gay marriage now, but there are some other special concerns that LGBTQ community are concerned with. So how can you also help in the planning for people part of that community?
Listen, it's such an incredible, I've been representing the LGBTQ community for over 30 years and went through some very challenging times in the 90s when I had a lot of clients pass away and the fight over the care and things like that. I always include in my documents, if you have, whether you're married or whether you're not married, always make sure that the person that you are closest to, the one that you love, has the ability to make decisions for you and that you share those things. For example, I do a living will. I do a designation of healthcare surrogate, which is so important because when you step into a hospital for a cold, complications may arise, and it just happens to be that way. And so you need someone that is with you to make those decisions for you. I always recommend that. Also, when you're talking about a marriage, if you're married, you've got to, again, when you come into a marriage, are you going to have a prenup? Are you going to have a postnup? Those things are going to dictate your thing. If you have a certain amount of assets that you want to keep outside of the marriage, then that has to be defined. These are issues that are things that need to be addressed so you can have a plan. And then, do you do a plan together or not? I have had married LGBT couples that come in, and I will do one trust for one partner, one trust for the other, and they literally decide to split their assets, and the assets of one at his death will go to his family. The assets of another one at his death, of the other one at his death, will go to his family. It's a beautiful way to split to make sure that everybody's happy. But it could be that you have children, and all of a sudden now you need to go through the same questions that you didn't think you were going to ask yourself. All of a sudden you get married, you're happy, you have 2 kids, and what am I going to do? Who's going to take care of the kids? The same issues that need to be addressed that you maybe didn't think about 20 years ago.
Sure. Yeah. So. Well, and two, part of the gay community is that they may not be married, right. And if someone passes away, then the partner may not have any rights whatsoever, and the family of the deceased comes in and takes it all, or even if it's in the hospital, is dictating the care in the hospital. So you need those documents you've just talked about,
Marty,
right?
it's so important. The hospital decisions are so important when you're not married and you don't want your family that you haven't seen for X amount of years, or you're not close to. You may see them once every 3 years, but they're not your partner. They're not the person that you're living with. And that may be that you got to make sure that you have the documents to allow them to do that. You also have to make sure that if you have a long-term relationship and you guys have been working on a business together and you wanted to make sure that that person got something from that business, that you put that in writing in a trust and say, I want this person to be able to get what I have, because I love that person, because I've been living with that person, because we put together a business all these years, or because I've had his or her support all these years, and I want that person to enjoy that.
Right.
And what better way to use those resources for something? It's your money, it's your assets. Why don't you give it to those that you love the most? But you got to put it in writing, because if you don't have it in writing, that family that you haven't seen in forever is going to show up. I had a guy who 2 guys living together for 30 years near my office. One dies, the other one doesn't have the house in his name. And so him and his father moves in and helps him out. And all of a sudden, we go to court, and the judge demands that we do an air search, because technically these guys are not married. They've been together for 30 years, but they're not married. So we do an air search. Lo and behold, turns up a cousin in Chicago who had never seen him. And he came and he was given the property. I had to negotiate so my client could stay in the property for X amount of time so he could transition out of that property that he'd been in for 30 years, okay? But there was a cousin who all of a sudden got a very nice house, probably worth about $850,000 at that time.
And they may never have met.
And they never met.
Oh my gosh. It's so true. It's just like in business, where you mentioned I do the 12 contracts that every business should have. I think it's easier for business people to think, oh, well, I've got to put this in writing because something may happen. We may have a disagreement because quite frankly, if we never had disagreements in life with anyone, we'd need nothing in writing and we could go along just on our merry way. But it's clearly not the case. There's disagreements, and anytime money's involved, people's memory may change, and it becomes a little different, and especially if that person isn't there to defend what they were thinking. So, and that's another nice part about having a trust, like the one you did for me. If a relationship ends, all I had to do was pick up the phone and say, Peter, Mr. X is out, Mr. Y is in, and you can change that, and it made it very easy. So thank you for doing that. Yes, absolutely. It is revocable. And so the first guy got enough. But anyway, it's a great peace of mind tool. And, when you talk about families that come in and just really either didn't approve of the relationship or may not have known. I had dinner last night with a couple. He owns a truck dealership in South Florida, and he is not out to his family. He's 70 years old. He's still not out to his family. His partner isn't out to his family. They've been together for several years, and when they get together with their families, they do it separately. And so this is just fraught with a problem when one of them goes, because the families never knew about the partner or never knew about the lifestyle. So it's doubly important then to have a trust and have all those documents in order.
And Marty, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what's sad is their true wishes would never be expressed on paper unless they actually put them on paper, because whatever they want, if they don't put it on paper, they're not going to be listened to. No one knows.
No one knows, right. And even if people were okay with it, no one knows. And or no one knew that the person existed. Yeah, it's just out there. And so that's what I want to make it really clear to our viewers that are part of that LGBTQ community, that you need to have this, especially if you're not married. And quite frankly, in the entire community, because if for whatever reason your family doesn't know about the other person or doesn't approve of the other person, but this is your life partner, you want things to be divided up as you wanted them. And it's just so important. And you and I, with all these years of practicing law, you hear these horror stories, you see these horror stories, and we're either asked to fix them or to explain to the clients that are coming to us that say, really, do we need to spend this money? And we're telling them, really, you need to spend the money, because if you don't, your partner may be out of luck, or you may be out of luck because your business has gone a different direction and you haven't protected yourself.
Or worse, and I want the community to listen to this, or worse, to tell a client you are getting nothing after 30 years of a relationship because you were not included in anything in writing. And unfortunately, that's going to mean that that these people, unless they're incredibly giving, which they aren't, usually, you're getting nothing. That's, to me, the hardest thing to say to someone. And you try to find a way, but it's really hard. I had a gentleman call me, and his partner of 20 years had passed away, and they had left a certain amount of money in a checking account. It wasn't a lot. It was maybe $10,000, $12,000. And I said to him, tell me a little bit about him. Well, he had some credit card debt. Well, if you got to go to probate, which you do, because his name wasn't included in his partner's account.
Sure.
If we go to probate, that credit card company is going to put a claim in there for sure.
That's right.
And between the cost of the probate and what he owed in credit cards, I said to him, I'm sorry, but it doesn't make any sense for you to spend the money to collect $10,000 that's going to be out the door to pay for the probate and to pay for the credit cards. It just makes no sense.
Sure.
You're going to have to walk away from money that really should have been yours. Again, he wasn't included in the account, and he should have been, but if he wasn't, simply putting the account in a trust and making him a beneficiary would have made it easy. He would have gone to the bank with that trust, picked up his money, and it would have been end of the story in a good way.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And but with some planning and peace of mind, that could have happened. Absolutely. You've talked about, I believe, 4 documents that are essentials to estate planning. When should a person start that planning process?
It's a great question because I have had people in their early 20s come in and you would say, well, maybe they don't have a lot, but they have one child or adopting a child or having a child. And it's a great opportunity to be able to do your plan, start your plan now. Because I always tell them, if you start off with a good plan, this plan will carry you for the rest of your life. You may need to, I have clients that come in. I just had a client that passed away recently. I did his plan 30 years ago. They never changed it, and they put everything under the trust. And so it was very easy. The kids got the properties, everything else. It was beautiful. That's the idea that I want people to take away, that even if you have to make changes, you can make changes to that document, but you don't have to. Okay, so my basic thoughts on a plan, I always have a trust. I always have what I call a pour over will. What the pour over will does, Marty, is it basically, if you've left anything out of the trust, it picks it up and puts it in the trust. Not so simply, you still have to go to probate. But I had a client that put everything in his trust, goes into the hospital for a little heart procedure, got complicated, gets pneumonia, passes away at 73, fairly young. All of a sudden,
Very young, Peter.
Very young.
Very young.
The closer we get to that age, it's very young.
Very young.
Yes. And so family comes to me and this is, Dad opened an account at the bank for $100,000. He got a check and it was in his name. What happened was that the bank officer, who should have known better because every other account that man had in that bank was under his trust, opened an account under his name. So when he dies, he's got $100,000 out of trust. So I had to go to probate, but was able to quickly move in and out of probate because I had that last will, pour over will, which takes anything outside the trust and puts it into the trust. So that document really was a lifesaver in that case. I also use those documents when you have children or you have special needs kids. Who do you want? If you're not around, who do you want to take care of those kids? Their money and it's called a guardian of the body and the guardian of the property. Who's going to watch the child and who's going to take care of the finances for the child. I do a power of attorney, which is so important because if you're halfway across the world and you need to sign an important document, that document, your significant other can sign on your behalf, with that power. It's a really strong 8-9 page document that I draft with all the powers enumerated in them. I have my 2 healthcare documents. Living will, no one wants to talk about. But it basically says if I am in a vegetative state, I do not want to be preserved artificially. That's the case for most cases. I read in the New York Times last week that, and I've been noticing this in hospitals for a while. And not to make any accusations, but, the donor, the organ donor issue has become very challenging with so many people with so many problems. And I was reading an article in the Times last week of people, they were starting to cut into them to take their heart. And all of a sudden they realized that the person was still alive. How do you make that mistake? Okay, but they were pronounced dead, but they weren't. And so how much do you wait? I always put the 2 doctors have to sign. It's hard to get 2 doctors to put anything in writing.
Yes, I know.
2 doctors have to sign that you're in a vegetative state to do so. At that point, you do not want to be preserved artificially. Now, if you're in that state, are you going to be intravenously fed? You don't know if you're suffering or not. It's always a big question. Are you going to be fed? Are you going to be given liquids? Or are you not? Most doctors will tell you that you don't feel anything, but some people will say, how do they know? It's always a big question. If you're in a hospital with COVID-19, are you intubated or not? It became a political issue a few years ago. I ask every doctor that I come across, and they always tell me, if I'm in a hospital with COVID-19, I want to be intubated. That's a better chance of life. There's still people that come to my office, Marty, that say, I don't want to be intubated. It's a political issue for them. Yeah. I don't understand it, but that's what that is.
That's their choice,
That's their choice.
And
they
that's
have
the
a
beauty
choice
of
to
it.
put it.
They've
And
made
it's
that
in
choice.
writing.
Sure.
The same thing. So, and I have an assignment of personal property. So your personal property, everything that you have that can move, including cars, including pieces of art, all that, move into your trust to that document. I have a disposition of personal property, and I also have a pre-need where you pre-name your guardian in the event that you needed one. really important piece of document, because you're basically saying, this person who's in my life, if I all of a sudden couldn't take care of myself, I would want that person to be the one to do so.
Sure.
So that's a really good document.
Certainly like to make that choice.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, literally, that's the plan that I put together for people. And when you put it together, you sign that, and you put your assets in the trust, which is the other part that we were talking about that people forget. I see people come in, they went to a lawyer, they did a trust, they have a trust. Well, what do you got? I have nothing in that trust. Well, you did nothing, to be honest with you, because you got to make that trust, you got to fund that trust.
And really, that's what you do as the estate planning lawyer. You make sure they put those things in.
We do it. I have two assistants in my office that all they do is to help you transfer your assets into your trust.
So if you're doing this online or with AI, you don't have that team to put those things in, and you may have a worthless document that looks really good to you. So once again, the experience is so important. Peter, you and I went to law school at similar times, really. I graduated long before he did. But anyway, so, you know, we've gone through a lot of changes. Law school, we were using typewriters. We had fax machines. Yep. We had, you know, those of you who still know what a fax is, it used to come out on this roll of paper that if you didn't photocopy it, it would disappear in 2 weeks. So it was great. You know, you kept those things, and after a while you thought, oh my gosh, I didn't copy this, and I can't read a darn thing on it, right? And well, now we have the internet. Everyone's so smart because they listen to the internet and Instagram or Facebook with the expert of the day who learned this yesterday and is now sharing it with the rest of their friends. And AI, which is taking over, but is clearly not replacing experience and know-how and the ability to get things done. So through all of these decades of changes, how has estate planning changed?
That's another great point and a great question from you, because the needs are the same. The lack of certainty about the future is what drives us to plan. And I think one of the things that we have to continue to overcome is the idea that it's going to bring on, you know, bad things when you plan. But once you're able to do that, then what you need in front of you is someone with experience, because the needs are the same today as they were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. You want to be able to orderly, with avoiding lawyers as much as you can, avoiding judges and court systems.
God forbid. Yeah, no.
You know, you want to be able to pass to your kids what comes naturally, what your assets are. And you may not be a Kennedy where everybody has a trust by the time that they're born and so on, but you have the ability to be able to control your assets. This is the other thing that I tell people. As long as you have sense and you can understand, you can be in control of your assets. You don't need to have a replacement. You should always have someone as a successor trustee. I always demand that, because if there was a need for someone to take over, I always tell people there's three players in a trust. You have a creator, you have a trustee, which is the one that manages it, and you have a beneficiary. Most people are all the same thing, but I always tell them, you need to have a successor trustee just as you need to have a successor beneficiary, because this trust is for your benefit. And if you can't recognize yourself in the mirror, you're gonna need help running that trust for your benefit. You may be 97 years old and still doing great physically, but you may not be able to be all there to help yourself. That's where your successor trustee comes in. Or sometimes your co-trustee. If an elderly person comes to me, I always suggest, why don't we put one of your treasured people, whether it's a child or a close friend or someone, as a co-trustee to help you with the process.
Good point, good point. And, you know, probably the watchword there is that successor trustee shouldn't be someone substantially older than you are. It should be someone younger or the same age, right?
That's a great point, because you don't want somebody passing before you do. Even then, I have language that says that at the very end, when you run out of trustees, there should be an institutional trustee. In other words, whether it's a bank or other financial institution to do that. But you don't really want to get to that point if you can do it, because you really want somebody who knows you and knows how to handle your money without having to go.
Yeah,
to
knows your wishes,
a third
right?
party that
Yeah,
knows your wishes.
absolutely, and someone you trust. No, it's interesting. So we've talked a great deal about what people need, and that it brings about peace of mind. And you and I both were involved in bigger firms before we really established where we're operating now. So tell us a little bit more about your firm, where you're located, and how it all works. In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
Like I told you earlier, I literally redefined how I practice law by looking at my definition of service and how I could serve. And when I did that, it changed my practice. So my firm I brought to Coral Way, which is right between Coral Gables and downtown Miami, and it's very close to the courthouse, within 10 minutes of the courthouse. I did that, pre-COVID, because we were in the courthouse all the time on probate matters and so
Sure.
on. And now most of these things are done on Zoom, but still very accessible. Everybody's accessible to it, whether it's through US1 or 95 or so on. But I have a staff of people that are trained to actually be of service. So I have 2 people that actually just do the transfer of assets into the trust. I partner with someone that does a lot of the probate work for our firm now, with a lot of experience. And we cover, Zoom has really opened up the state of Florida, because before I would say, I do this in Broward, Dade County, Palm Beach, and, Monroe County a couple of times. But, now I have cases in Tallahassee. I have cases in the west coast of Florida. I have cases, in everywhere, Gainesville. And why? Because Zoom allows us to do these things now. We can have hearings and we can open and close cases without ever having gone to the place physically. So it makes it more feasible financially for clients. It's cheaper. You don't have to go pay for an attorney sitting in a courtroom for 4 hours waiting to get to a 5-minute hearing like we used to go through a lot.
Right. Well, and you get the expertise of a big city lawyer in some place that could be quite rural without the same
And trust
level
me,
of choices.
They have the same problems that cities have. Same issues.
Sometimes more.
And
I just
sometimes
listen to
more.
country music, and you hear all those problems.
That's right.
And and they're complicated problems. So. But, Peter, you and I have been friends for a long time. We get together, for dinner, and you have a fantastic wife. Memory is lovely, successful, beautiful, and
loves you.
a great family with successful kids, and you must be so pleased. How do you balance that family and work life?
First of all, you just got yourself another brunch at the house. Just
good.
for saying that.
Great.
Because
And she's a
Memory
great
loves
cook,
she's
so
a
it's a
great
wonderful
cook,
thing.
and she
I
loves
did well.
Marty.
Yes,
I will
no,
tell
don't
you
tell
that.
her.
Those are
And,
two
yes,
things she
okay,
loves. So you got yourself at least another brunch.
Good.
But that's a great
On a new dining room table like
on
that,
the
too.
new
Yes.
dining room table that I didn't expect to get, but I did
You got
get.
it.
What are we doing? So the balance is really important for me. I get up in the morning at 5:30 and I go to the gym. And I always say that I try to lift heavy, because nothing after that is going to be harder in my day than when I do at 6 o'clock in the morning.
point.
So it clears my mind, and it's about the only time, and you know this because you're a very busy attorney, you know that after 7 o'clock, our phones are on and we get calls and we're answering people and we're taking care of problems, and it's what we do. So I literally have that time to myself, and by the time I walk out of that gym, I've completed something large in my day. I try to give myself, 20 minutes a day to meditate. And sometimes if I could do it twice a day, that's great. But to give myself moments of silence to balance me. We face a world that is so aggressive in so many ways. We see so many challenges. We see so many sad stories that you see, and you get, you feel for these people. But you also need to be able to separate yourself from all that pain. And so you create, for me, it's meditation to allow me to breathe in a very challenging environment that we face in today's world. And as attorneys, people don't come to you because everything's hunky-dory. They come
Right.
to you because they have problems.
They got a problem.
And some problems are bigger than others. And you suffer through watching good people go through difficult times. And all you can do is help them out. And you do help them out, but not, sometimes things are very, very challenging. And sometimes you see cases of people that have gone through a lot, or you see people that are dying and they're trying to get their paperwork together right before they pass. That's always challenging. You get a glimpse of what that's like before wanting to even get a glimpse of it. So all that stuff eats away at you. So you balance it by doing things that you love. Like I love to work out. I love to meditate. And then finding time with friends like you and Michael, people that we care about, having dinner, having cocktails. That's what life is about. It's about friends. It's about family. It's about my wife has the kids over and their significant others every Sunday for dinner. Everybody's invited. Whoever can come will come. And we gather together as a family, and we're always grateful to be together. And what else can you ask of life? To be able to breathe and to be able to move around, how lucky we are. I always remind myself, there's so many people that are ill in bed. One of the issues that I find in America today is that, we're putting people in assisted living facilities in their 50s, Marty. It used to be people wouldn't get in there until their 80s, but now in their 50s, people are so ill that they're put in facilities because they can't take care of themselves. And so when you look at things like that, it moves you, and it moves you to exercise and take better care of yourself,
yes.
number one, but it also makes you feel so fortunate that you have your health and that you have great friends like you, and that you're blessed with good people, because I do feel that what you are inside is reflected in your outside world. So the good people in my life like you come as a result of me trying to be of service to people. And as a result, my payback is getting good people in my life who have good deeds around them that continue to do good deeds to other people like you do. So I'm very fortunate to have friends like you.
Well, you do good things for so many people, and obviously your family is a testament to what a good person you are and what a good father you've been and a good husband. And so it's wonderful to see. And just as you've said about being around me, I feel the same about being around you, because it's so important, I think, for all of us to live in the now and appreciate today, appreciate what we're doing, appreciate the things that we have, and not worry so much about what other people have or what we didn't get. We've got to enjoy what we have and plan for our future, right? And think about, well, gee, I want to do this today, and it's going to make me feel good to do this, and maybe I'm going to help someone. Maybe I've got a client that we can work out a problem for, and I can do a contract for, or get them out of some kind of risk problem that's there, and you're helping people plan for their future and making certain that their children are taken care of. So, we're just really fortunate, aren't we?
We sit in a room at BNI, and I hear people say, Marty saved my business, and I hear that all the time. And he did this contract that really affected the way that I'm running my business now. And I'm always proud of that, because you're helping people out, and I just try to be like you. I try to help out in whatever way I can. But you're so right about the present moment. One of the most influential books that I ever read for me was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Absolutely.
And to me, that book really brought to reality that really the past just happened, so you can't really bring it back.
Right.
The future, when it happens, it's the present. It never happens. But we get stressed and anxious about the future and the past, things that already happened and things that will never happen. So what do we think? What are we doing? What we need to do is concentrate on the only reality, which is the present. And you just so aptly said it. That is our center. This is our balancing. If we're able to stick to staying in the present. And I was having this conversation with a friend a couple of days ago about this. And right now, we've had a wonderful conversation. I'm energized by your energy and your presence and us exchanging and laughing and sharing stories. That is what I'm concentrating on. That is present to me. I'm not thinking about what appointments I have this afternoon and the 3 clients that are going to call me with issues that I know that need to be resolved this week regarding some planning matter or some probate matter or some other matter that has to deal with what I do. And so instead of that, I'm focused, and it's been an incredibly energizing morning to spend with you sitting here talking. And that's what staying in the present is about.
So true. And, you know, I think about this on a regular basis because I see so many people comparing themselves to others and saying, well, gee, I worked really hard, but I'm not in the same place as somebody else. Well, that isn't helpful. All it does is make you feel bad. And you've got to think about, well, where did I come from? What have I done? What am I doing today? And is what I'm doing today fulfilling? And if you are, and if you're feeling that way, it is energizing, just as you said. It's like being on this podcast. I love doing these. It's an opportunity to share with people that I respect, people that I think know what they're talking about, people that have something to say, and hopefully the people that are listening, when this podcast ends, they say, wow, I'm so glad I listened to that. I was either entertained, I learned something, or my gosh, it took my mind off of something that was unpleasant that happened beforehand, and now I'm in a different place right now. So it's a great feeling. You know, you've also talked about, you said you meditate, and that when you do sit in silence and you ask the right questions, sometimes those answers will come to you. What do you mean by that?
I always feel that you don't worry about the answers. All you have to do is the questions. I was telling the story to a friend a couple of days ago about Einstein and the theory of relativity.
Okay.
Einstein asked one question. He wasn't getting the answer, but he had faith that he was going to get the answer from that one question. And so he's walking in a park with a friend, and he gets the answer to that question that he had asked himself. And he tells his friend, stop, I have to run back to my apartment. And for the next 5 hours, he wrote the theory of relativity as it was coming to him. It was the answer to his question. All he had to do was ask the question. The answer is going to come to you. You don't worry about the answer, you worry about what kind of question you need to ask, and the best questions are going to get you the best results. Because it's in the question, the power is in the question, always is.
Right.
And I've learned to basically turn the concern over and say, you know, here's my question. How do we get through this? Mm-hmm. How do we overcome that? How many times in my day, and there's quite a few, am I so challenged by a particular situation that I always say, I'm not doing this by myself, universe, God, whatever you want to use. You're right in it with me, and you help me through it, and all of a sudden the perfect solution comes out. You have to do nothing other than ask the right question. So I live on questions.
All right, Peter, let's get to know the man behind the mission. This is what we call the rapid fire. First thing you do in the morning?
First thing I do, I put on my gym clothes.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
A book that changed your life besides the one you already told us about?
Awareness by Neville Goddard.
Your favorite quote or mantra?
When you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at change, by Wayne Dyer.
Oh, that is good. If you weren't a lawyer, what would you be doing?
I'd be a diplomat.
You'd be really good at that. Not that we need any of those right now. But, you know, you may want to think about changing because being of service might really be there, although it might be a difficult thing to do right now. But what's the one thing that people are surprised to learn about you?
That I practice Buddhist meditation.
There you go. Peter Ariz, estate lawyer, spiritual seeker, entrepreneur, and servant leader. What I love most about Peter's stories is that, you know, he reframes estate planning into more of a self-guided plan, a peace of mind that takes you from uncertainty to certainty so that you live in the present, you enjoy the present, and you do that because you know your family members are protected. Peter, a great guy, a great lawyer. Remember, Peter Ariz, Ariz Law, on Coral Way in Miami. No other estate lawyers. Until next time, I'm Marty Davis, reminding you to ask the right questions, live in the present, and put your thoughts in writing. Take care and plan with a purpose. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Marty. Beautiful.